Good afternoon. Thank you for being here this afternoon. My name is Jeff. I'm the program director here at the Loft Cinema, and I'd like to welcome you to the latest installment in our ongoing series, Journalism on Screen, where we pair great films about journalism or films with a journalistic slant with great guest speakers who discuss and illuminate what we have just seen. And I really love this series. I always learn a lot from the series thanks to the insights of our special guests. And I always say I have the utmost respect for journalists and all the work that they do, and especially in the world today. I think they're very important. So I salute any journalists who are here today. Thank you for your hard work. Yes, there's some journalists, I know. Speaking of important, hardworking journalists, today's film is Mike Wallace is Here, a documentary about the 60 Minutes journalist, the legendary journalist Mike Wallace. This premiered at Sundance last year, where I saw it, and I loved it. This is an example of the kind of documentary I really, really enjoy, but I rarely get. It's that documentary made solely out of archival footage, which means no new talking head footage. And over the course of his career, of course, Mike Wallace supplied lots of fodder for archival material because he interviewed everyone. And in fact, this movie, by virtue of what it is, I think has one of the greatest all-star casts in any film ever. I can think of no other motion picture that stars Johnny Carson, Bette Davis, Salvador Dali, Malcolm X, and Bill O'Reilly all together at last in the same film. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, everyone is in this film, and it's great. So the Journalism on Screen series here at the Loft Cinema is presented by some great partners, including the New York Times, the Arizona Daily Star, the Daily Wildcat UA-TV3, the UA College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, the U of A School of Journalism, and Arizona In. And they all make this possible, so thanks to all of them. And to introduce our guest speaker today, I'd like to introduce one of the key players in making journalism on screen happen. Nancy Sharkey has spent more than 25 years at the New York Times in various editorial positions, and she is currently a professor of practice at the U of A School of Journalism. And as I said, she really makes this series happen. So please welcome Nancy Sharkey.
Thanks, Jeff. And Jeff, of course, Jeff Yanc, a Tucson treasure, knows more about films than anyone I know. So many thanks to Jeff for all the support. So Mike Wallace is Here is the latest film in our 5th season of Journalism on Screen. And we're particularly pleased to be presenting this one for a couple of reasons. The production itself, as Jeff mentioned, is really interesting in solely using archival footage. 60 Minutes gave the director, Avi Belkin, unprecedented access to the vault. He researched 1,400 hours of tape for this 90-minute film, and he talks about inviting reflection, how the film invites reflection on the state of media today. If Mike Wallace was known for gutsy, long, investigative interviews, he was also known for understanding that television had a need for performance. And so there's a direct line in the film to some of the best investigative reporting that we see today, and also to some of the stunt performance journalism that we see today. It raises questions about audience, journalistic values, legacy media in an era of sound bites and fragmentation, and God knows, tweets. We'll explore some of these questions today after the screening. And our guest for the conversation, as you can see, is Andy Rosenthal, who we're really honored to have with us today. He spent most of his career at the New York Times as Washington correspondent, Washington bureau chief, foreign editor, assistant managing editor for news, and finally the editorial page editor, where he oversaw editorials, the letters page, and the opinion page, the op-ed columns. In the newsroom, he directed coverage of some of the most important stories of the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s, 9/11, the invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, the first Gulf War, presidential administrations, and all of the presidential elections beginning with 1988 until Bush 43, you know, Florida, Shads, all of that. He joined the Times in 1987 after working at the Associated Press, where he was Denver bureau chief, and then he became Moscow bureau chief. He graduated from the University of Denver with a degree in American history. And he was literally born into journalism. He was born in New Delhi, where his father, Abe Rosenthal, was stationed early in what became Abe's storied career at the New York Times, ultimately becoming executive editor of the paper. I read that in 1964, and I've confirmed this with Andy, he won in 3rd grade in Manhattan at PS 183 the spelling bee, spelling the word necessary correctly. It seems like, yeah, it's a great accolade. It also seems to me like a really important word for a future editorial writer. Interviewing him today will be my friend and colleague from the University of Arizona, Bill Schmidt. Bill was a member of the executive leadership of the Times for many years, Pulitzer Prize-winning correspondent, and covered both national and foreign bureaus. Bill met Andy in Denver way back in, I think, 1981 or 2. Andy was working for the AP then, as I said, and Bill had just been hired by the Times as the new Denver bureau chief. Andy was being sent to Moscow to become bureau chief there. Bill had just been bureau chief for Newsweek in Moscow. So Bill had a stack of language books that he lent to Andy. And I'm sure Andy said, to which I'm sure Andy said, "Spasibo." Finally, one more thing I learned about this film. It premiered at Sundance, and at Sundance, Chris Wallace, Mike's son, was in the audience and was making the rounds, and he kept getting asked what his dad would have thought about this film. He had a stock answer, according to the director, Avi Belkin. The answer was, a 90-minute film about him? He would have loved it. So with that, Mike Wallace is here.